He was a billionaire who owned the city, a man who saw people as assets or obstacles. She was a waitress at an exclusive restaurant, someone he thought was worth less than the $10,000 Petrus he was drinking. He heard her accent and decided she was simple, uneducated, and worthless. He mocked her publicly. But that billionaire, Marcus Thorne, just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because he wasn't just talking to a waitress. He was talking to the one woman in the world who held the key to his entire empire, and she was about to destroy him in 6 different languages. The air inside Aurelia was different. It wasn't just cleaner than the New York City smog outside. It was heavier, richer. It was the smell of old money, new money, and the suffocating perfume of ambition. Aurelia was a 3-Michelin-star fortress on the 60th floor of a midtown tower, a place where deals weren't just made, they were sanctified. The cutlery was crystal silver, the stems of the wine glasses were impossibly thin, and the waiters moved with the silent, practiced grace of ballet dancers. Elena Rostova was one of those dancers. To the clientele, she was just the waitress. The pretty one with the dark hair pulled into a severe, elegant bun, and that accent. It was a soft, vaguely Eastern European sound, a slight trill on her R's, a flattening of her thefts. It was the only smudge on the otherwise pristine canvas of Aurelia. The manager, Mr. Davies, had hired her because her resume, though sparse, showed 6 months at a Relays and Chateau property in Geneva. He assumed the accent would fade. It hadn't. But Elena was the best. She was invisible until the exact moment a water glass dipped below the halfway mark. She anticipated the need for bread before the client's hand reached for it. She memorized the complex, off-menu dietary restrictions of every regular. She observed. Tonight she was observing Table 7, the King Table. It was booked under the name Thorne, Marcus Thorne. The name echoed in the financial world with the sharp, definitive crack of a gavel. Thorne was the CEO and founder of Thorne Capital, a private equity firm known for vulture capitalism. He bought distressed companies, tore them apart for their assets, and sold the bones for a profit. He was a new money titan, utterly ruthless, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left out in the cold. He was dressed in a custom Keaton suit that probably cost more than Eleanor's yearly salary, and he was in a spectacularly bad mood. Elena knew the signs, the way he snapped his menu closed rather than handing it to her, the curt, dismissive wave when she tried to recite the specials, the way his eyes, a piercing, icy blue, darted around the room, not appreciating the Calder tapestry on the wall, but assessing the power at the other tables. He was hosting 3 other men. Elena, a student of the world by necessity, recognized the archetypes instantly. Man 1, Bernard Dubois, the silver-haired, impeccably dressed CEO of a French luxury conglomerate. He smelled faintly of Guerlain and aristocratic boredom. Man 2, Sheikh Khalid Al-Jamil, a younger, powerfully built man from Saudi Arabia, wearing a subtle, astronomically expensive Patek Philippe watch. He represented a slice of the Saudi sovereign wealth fund. His stillness was unnerving. He observed everything. Man 3, David Chen, a logistics and tech mogul from Shanghai. He was quiet, smiling, but his eyes missed nothing. He was the future, and he knew it. This was not a dinner. This was a summit. Wine, Thorne barked, not at Eleanor, but at the air just past her shoulder. The 98 Petrus, and don't let the sommelier waste my time. Just bring it. Elena nodded, her face a mask of polite neutrality. Of course, Mr. Thorne. Her voice, soft and accented, hung in the air. Thorne's eyes snapped to her for the first time. It wasn't a look of acknowledgement. It was a look of annoyance, as if a fly had landed on his $8,000 bottle of wine. He visibly winced at her pronunciation of his name. Thorne. He smirked, a cruel, thin line. He looked at David Chen and said, loud enough for the entire section to hear, "You see what I have to deal with? They let anyone in off the street these days. Can't even get the language right." Bernard Dubois winced. Sheikh Al-Jamil's face remained stone. David Chen offered a non-committal smile. Elena felt the heat rise in her neck, a familiar, coppery taste of adrenaline and humiliation. She had survived far worse than Marcus Thorne. She had survived the fall of her family, the liquidation of her life, and the icy terror of an asylum office. She was Elena Rostova-Volkova. Her father, Mikhail Volkov, had once controlled half the energy sector in Russia. He had crossed the wrong man in the Kremlin. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed, and he himself had disappeared during a business trip to Dubai. Thorne Capital, she knew, had been the Western partner firm that facilitated the legal acquisition of those frozen assets, buying a $20 billion empire for pennies on the dollar. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a rude guest. He was the man who had picked the meat from her father's bones, and he had no idea who was pouring his water. "Excuse me," Elena said, her voice perfectly level, the accent still softly in place. She turned and walked, not with the hurried scurry of a chastised waitress, but with the ramrod straight spine of a woman who had once walked the halls of Davos with her father. The battle had begun. She just didn't know that tonight the war would finally come to her. The dinner was a masterclass in tension. Marcus Thorne was performing. He was trying to sell these three men on a monumental deal, a joint venture to build and control a new, automated deep-water shipping port in Oman. It was a deal that would leverage Chen's logistics tech, Al-Jamil's regional access and capital, and Dubois' high-volume shipping needs. Thorne Capital would, of course, be the managing partner, the one holding the strings. Elena moved around the table like a ghost. She cleared the amuse-bouche plates. She served the seared foie gras. And she listened. Thorne was loud, brash, and distinctly American in his approach. He spoke of synergy and disruption and crushing the competition. "We move now. We corner the entire Indian Ocean route," Thorne said, stabbing a piece of lobster. "The EU is slow. The other funds are asleep. We build it. We own it." David Chen pushed a scallop around his plate. "The regulatory hurdles in Oman are significant, Marcus. The Dukium Port Authority has relationships. Your projections seem optimistic." "Optimistic?" Thorne laughed, a sound like gravel shaking in a tin can. "Optimistic is for college professors. I deal in certainty. I have people in Muscat. It's handled." Sheikh Al-Jamil spoke for the first time, his voice a low, smooth baritone. "The people you have, Mr. Thorne, do they report to the Diwan? Or do they merely shine the shoes of the Diwan?" The table went silent. Thorne's face tightened. He was being challenged. Elena arrived at that exact, terrible moment with the $8,000 Chateau Petrus. She had already presented the bottle. The sommelier, intimidated by Thorne, had allowed her to pour it after the decanting. She moved to Thorne's right, angling the bottle perfectly, the dark red wine flowing into the Zolto glass without a sound. Thorne, furious at the Sheikh's question and needing to reassert his dominance, made his move. As Elena poured, he shifted in his chair, a sudden, aggressive movement, gesturing wildly as he spoke. "My contacts," he snarled, "are at the highest level." His elbow connected with Elena's wrist. It wasn't a gentle bump. It was a hard, intentional shove, a physical manifestation of his rage, redirected at the nearest, softest target. Elena's hand, trained for precision, barely moved. But the laws of physics were immutable. A single, dark red droplet of Petrus flew from the bottle's lip, bypassed the glass, and landed starkly on the pristine white fret tablecloth. A tiny, perfect $50 a stain. The silence that followed was absolute. It was louder than a scream. Mr. Davies, the manager, who had been watching from across the room, visibly paled. Elena froze, the bottle still in her hand. Thorn slowly turned his head. He looked at the red drop. He looked at the bottle in her hand. And then he looked at her. "You clumsy idiot," he hissed. The venom in his voice was shocking. "Do you know what this is? This is Petrus. This bottle costs more than your entire paycheck. Can you even understand me?" Elena stood perfectly still. "Mr. Thorn, my apologies. It was a mistake?" He cut her off. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a theatrical, mocking whisper that carried across the table. "I don't pay for mistakes. I pay for perfection. But what can I expect from someone who sounds like they just got off a turnip truck from, where is it? Russia? Romania?" He turned to his guests, a performer playing to the crowd. "My apologies, gentlemen. It seems we have some low-quality help tonight. Hard to find good staff." Then he looked back at Eleanor, his eyes glinting with a truly personal cruelty. He spoke slowly, as if to a child. "You are stupid." He pointed a thick finger at her. "Do you understand English? Or is that too hard for you?" He tapped his own temple. "English. You speak it? Barely." Elena's face was a mask of white marble. The humiliation was total, public, and searing. She could feel the eyes of the bus boys watching from the service station, the pity from Mr. Davies, the cold assessment from Thorn's guests. Inside her, the terror and shame that had been her constant companions for 2 years suddenly receded. They were replaced by something cold, sharp, and brilliantly clear. It was the mind of Elena Rostova-Volkova, the Georgetown graduate, the polyglot, the survivor. The humiliation stopped. The calculation began. She set the Petrus bottle down on the service tray. She did not scurry away. She did not cry. She met Marcus Thorn's gaze. "Yes, Mr. Thorn," she said, her voice soft, the accent still perfectly in place. "I understand you completely." "Good," he sneered. "Now get out of my sight, and send someone who knows how to pour a damn wine." Elena did not move. Bernard Dubois, the Frenchman, finally spoke up. He looked mortified by Thorn's behavior. He gave Elena a look of pure sympathy, and murmured, trying to dismiss her kindly. Bernard murmured softly in French. "It's nothing serious, miss. Please forgive him. He's a barbarian." Thorn, who spoke no French, grinned. "That's right, Bernard. Tell her it's okay. She probably speaks some of that, right? Waitress stuff." And then the world shifted. Elena turned her head slowly to meet Bernard Dubois' eyes. The timid, accented waitress was gone. In her place was a woman of absolute, terrifying poise. She replied in flawless, aristocratic, science's po-accented French. Elena replied in flawless, aristocratic French. "Mr. Dubois, you are too kind. It is not for you to apologize. Ignorance is often the weapon of men who have nothing else." The effect was instantaneous. Bernard Dubois' jaw literally dropped. His wine glass, halfway to his lips, froze in mid-air. He stared at Elena as if she had just sprouted wings. The purity of her accent. It wasn't just fluent, it was native. It was the French of the 16th arrondissement, of boardrooms and generational wealth. Marcus Thorn, sensing the shift but not understanding its cause, grew visibly annoyed. "What? What did she say? Bernard?" Dubois slowly lowered his glass, his eyes never leaving Eleanor. David Chen, the Shanghai mogul, leaned forward, a flicker of keen interest in his eyes. Sheikh al-Jamil, who had been educated in Geneva, also understood. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. He was watching a predator. Thorn suddenly realized he was in a cage with a different, much more dangerous animal. She, Dubois stammered, looking at Thorn. She said, "You are very kind." Thorn grunted. "See? Knew she'd understand. Now get out." But Eleanor didn't move. She remained at the table, her posture no longer that of a servant, but of an equal. Sheikh al-Jamil, deeply intrigued, decided to test the waters. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. He addressed Elena, his voice smooth, in high, formal Arabic. Sheikh Al-Jamil asked in formal Arabic, "I don't understand. You work here, yet your French accent is that of the elite. How is that possible?" Thorne's head whipped around. "What the hell is this? Are you all ordering in different languages now? Just speak English." Elena turned her gaze to the sheikh. She inclined her head respectfully, and she answered in the same formal, classical Arabic, a language she had spent 3 years mastering at Georgetown's School of Foreign Service. Elena answered in fluent, classical Arabic. "Work doesn't define who we are, Sheikh. Work is what we do to live. Culture is who we are." She added, with a slight, knowing glint in her eye, referencing his earlier jab at Thorne. She added in the same tongue, "And some people shine the shoes of the elite, while others become them." The sheikh's mask of stillness broke. He let out a single sharp laugh of pure appreciation. He sat back, his arms crossed. "Incredible," he murmured in English to himself. David Chen, who had been watching this exchange with the intensity of a chess grandmaster, was next. He saw a puzzle, and he needed to solve it. He saw an asset. He spoke in rapid, businesslike Mandarin. David Chen asked her in quick, precise Mandarin, "Your French and Arabic are impressive. Tell me, what do you think of China's Belt and Road Initiative and these massive port projects?" It was a test, not just of language, but of intellect. Thorne was now beet red. "David, what is going on? This is a waitress. Stop talking to her." Elena looked at David Chen. The air in her lungs felt electric. This was her language, not just Mandarin, but the language of geopolitics, of macroeconomics. This was the world she was born to inhabit. She replied in perfectly tonal, precise Mandarin. Elena replied in flawless Mandarin. "Mr. Chen, the Belt and Road is more than infrastructure. It's the future of geopolitics. A port like Oman's won't depend on steel. It will depend on data. Whoever controls the clean supply chain data controls global shipping." David Chen's smile vanished, replaced by a look of profound, calculating respect. She hadn't just given a textbook answer. She had pinpointed the exact pivot point of his entire industry: clean data. It was the central thesis of the deal Thorne was trying to pitch, a nuance Thorne himself barely understood. 4 languages: French, Arabic, Mandarin, and of course, the accented English she had been speaking all night. Thorne was vibrating with rage. He was no longer in control of his own dinner. He was locked out, a monolingual brute pounding on the glass, while the real conversation happened inside. "Enough!" he roared, slamming his fist on the table. The crystal silver jumped. "This is insane! You're a circus act!" He jabbed his finger at Elena. "You're fired! Get out! Out!" Elena stood her ground. She looked at the 3 investors, then at the sputtering billionaire, and she spoke, for the first time, in her true voice. The accent was gone. What remained was a crisp, transatlantic, devastatingly precise English, the kind forged in the halls of the world's most expensive universities. "You can't fire me, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice cutting through his rage like a diamond, "because I don't work for you. And after this, I highly doubt they will either." She turned to Mr. Davies, who was approaching, his face ashen. She spoke to him in fluent, rapid Spanish, a language she'd learned working in the kitchens of D.C. to survive. She told the busboy in Spanish, "Miguel, call security, please. I think Mr. Thorne isn't feeling well and is about to cause a scene." The manager, whose name was actually Davies, just stared. But the busboy named Miguel, standing by the service station, nodded and reached for his radio. Finally, Elena looked back at Marcus Thorne, the man who had laughed at her accent, the man who had helped ruin her family. She leaned in, and under her breath, so only he could hear, She whispered in her sixth language, her native, perfect, ice-cold Russian. She whispered in Russian, "You're an empty man, Marcus. Dust, and you're about to be blown away." Thorne, who had business dealings in Russia, didn't need a translator for the tone. He recognized the sound of pure, unadulterated contempt. He stared at her, his face a mask of confusion and fury. Who are you?" Eleanor just smiled, a small, terrible smile. "I'm the waitress, Mr. Thorne, the one who's hard to find." The word chaos did not exist in Aurelia's vocabulary, but this was the closest it had ever come. Marcus Thorne was on his feet, his $5,000 suit jacket bunched in his fists. You bitch! You set me up! This was a set-up!" Mr. Davies had finally rushed over. "Mr. Thorne, please, sir. Let's lower our voices." "Lower my voice?" Thorne laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. "I'll buy this restaurant, Davies. I'll buy this building and turn it into a parking garage. You are finished! And you," he jabbed his finger again at Eleanor, "you are deported. I don't know what game you're playing, but it's over." Eleanor simply stood, her hands clasped behind her back. She was an island of absolute calm in the storm of his making. It was David Chen who diffused the situation. "Marcus," Chen said, his voice quiet but laced with steel. He hadn't stood. He didn't need to. "Sit down. You are embarrassing yourself." Thorne froze. Of the three men at the table, Chen was the one he couldn't bully. Chen's logistics empire was the linchpin of the entire deal. "She embarrassed me," Thorne protested, his voice cracking. "No," Sheikh Al-Jamil said, standing up. He carefully placed his napkin on the table. She answered, "You insulted. There is a difference." He looked at Eleanor with profound respect. "Mademoiselle, your Arabic is as clear as your French. You studied at Al-Azhar?" "Georgetown, Sheikh. School of Foreign Service," Elena replied coolly. The Sheikh nodded, impressed. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had inverted. Thorne was now the jester, the loud, clumsy outsider. Elena, in her simple black and white uniform, was the nexus of power. The three most important men in the room were focused entirely on her. "This is fascinating," Bernard Dubois said, swirling his wine. "You are, without a doubt, the most overqualified waitress in the history of New York." "Mr. Thorne," David Chen said, cutting through the chatter, "this meeting is over. The deal, as you presented it, is not appealing." "Not appealing?" Thorne choked. "David, this is a $1 trillion play. We've been working on this for 6 months." "Yes," Chen said, "and in 30 minutes, this young woman highlighted the single greatest flaw in your entire proposal." Thorne looked baffled. "What? Her? What is she talking about? Data? We have the best data." Chen looked at Elena. "Please, mademoiselle, I'm sorry. What is your name?" "Elena," she said. "Elena, you said, whoever controls the clean supply chain data controls the shipping. Explain." Thorne exploded. "You're asking her? You're asking a waitress to analyze my pitch?" Elena ignored him. She looked directly at David Chen. "Mr. Thorne's proposal is based on hardware, concrete, cranes, ships. But the real value in modern logistics isn't the port, it's the information. The Omani Port Authority, as you noted, Mr. Chen, is difficult. They will demand a majority stake in the physical asset. They will nationalize it within 20 years. Thorne was white. That's a lie. "But," Elena continued, "they have no infrastructure to manage the data. The manifests, the tariffs, the customs tracking, the blockchain verification of cargo. If you build the port for them, but you own the proprietary software that runs the port, they can never get rid of you. You don't own the house, Mr. Chen. You own all the doors. Mr. Thorne was pitching you on buying the house." David Chen stared at her. He didn't smile. He was calculating. He was seeing a new, better, more ruthless deal. one that cut Thorn out entirely. "That is a very lucid analysis, Elena," Chen said. "It's garbage," Thorn yelled. "She read that in a magazine. She doesn't know what she's—" "Marcus," the sheikh interrupted, his voice final. "Enough. You are a terrible host, and it seems not a very thorough strategist." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a slim, platinum business card case. He extracted a card and held it out to Eleanor. "My fund has an office in New York. We are always looking for talent. People who understand both culture and capital. Call my chief of staff. He will be expecting you." Elena took the card. "Thank you, Sheikh Al-Jamil." Bernard Dubois chuckled. "Ah, Khalid, you are too fast. I was going to offer her a job as well. My North American division needs someone who understands luxe and logistique." He too offered a card. "Please, Elena, if the world of sovereign wealth is too dry for you, the world of fashion is much more fun." Thorn watched, his face a grotesque mask of apoplectic rage and disbelief. His guests, his targets, they were offering six-figure jobs to the waitress who had spilled his wine. "You're all insane," Thorn whispered, grabbing his briefcase. I'm done." He stormed away from the table, shoving Mr. Davies so hard the older man stumbled into a service cart. Thorn didn't look back. He stabbed the button for the private elevator, and when the doors opened, he was gone. The dining room, which had gone deathly silent, slowly exhaled. David Chen, however, had not offered a card. He had not offered a job. He just sat, watching Eleanor. "They are good offers, Eleanor," Chen said quietly. "You should take one. A job with the Saudis or LVMH. It is a good life." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Eleanor said, pocketing the cards. "I will consider it." She began to clear the plates from the abandoned dinner. Her hands were perfectly steady. "You are not just a Georgetown graduate, are you?" Chen asked. Eleanor paused, her hand on Thorn's lobster plate. "A few languages, a sharp analysis. This is not just a degree. This is survival." Elena looked at him. Her eyes, which had been so fiery, were now guarded. "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Chen, trying to pay my rent." Chen nodded slowly. "Of course. Well, the Petru was excellent, even the drop on the cloth." He placed his own card on the table, on top of his uneaten $150 entree. "The other two are offering you a job, Elena. I am offering you a conversation. I believe we may have mutual friends, or rather, mutual enemies." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked away, leaving Elena alone at the wrecked table, with 3 business cards and the smoking ruin of Marcus Thorn's billion-dollar deal. Elena did not sleep that night. She left Aurelia at 2 a.m. after a long, agonizing debrief with Mr. Davies. He hadn't fired her. He was too terrified and too confused. "I don't know what you are, Elena," he'd said, "but you're not a waitress. Just take the weekend. I'll figure this out." She took the subway back to her apartment in Washington Heights, a tiny 4th-floor walk-up she shared with 2 other women. Her room was barely a closet, containing a mattress on the floor, a second-hand desk, and a wall covered in index cards. The cards were covered in Russian, English, and Chinese. They were timelines, names, and corporate structures. They were the sum of her obsession for the last 2 years. At the center of the web, 2 names were circled in red: Marcus Thorn and Mikhail Volkov, Elena Rostova-Volkova. She had been born into a world of impossible privilege. Her father, Mikhail Volkov, was a post-Soviet titan, an energy magnate who was brilliant, ruthless, and one of the new czars of the Russian economy. Elena was his prodigy. He hadn't raised a daughter, he'd raised an heir. She wasn't just taught languages, she was immersed in them. A French governess, a Mandarin tutor from Beijing, an Arabic professor for summers in Dubai. She was running translation for her father's meetings by the time she was 16. She was admitted to Sciences Po in Paris for her undergrad and fast-tracked into the master's program at Georgetown's School of Foreign Service. She was, as Sheikh al-Jamil had guessed, elite. Then, it all vanished. Her father had grown too powerful and too independent. He had refused to give a controlling stake in his new Arctic pipeline to a Kremlin-controlled state company. It was a fatal miscalculation. It began with whispers, then investigations. He was accused of tax evasion, treason. His allies disappeared. Mikhail Volkov wasn't stupid. He began to move his assets, liquidating what he could, hiding them in complex offshore trusts. But the state was faster. They froze his primary holdings. He was a prisoner in his own country. 2 years ago, he had been lured to a reconciliation meeting in Dubai. He never arrived. His private jet was lost in a storm over the Black Sea. No wreckage was ever found. Elena, then in her final semester at Georgetown, was left with nothing. The trusts her father had set up for her were locked in legal battles. The Russian state declared her the daughter of a traitor. Her student visa was revoked. She was, suddenly, an asylum seeker, a ghost. But the real, final insult came 2 months later. Her father's primary company, Volkov Energy, a $20 billion corporation, was declared bankrupt by a Russian court and put up for emergency auction. The winner of that auction was a previously unknown shell company, the firm that financed the deal, that gave it the veneer of Western legitimacy and structured the hostile acquisition, was Thorn Capital. Marcus Thorn had bought her father's life's work for less than 1% of its value. He hadn't just picked the bones. He'd helped kill the lion. Elena knew all this. She had spent 2 years in hiding, working cash-in-hand jobs in kitchens and bars, living in poverty, all while using her Georgetown credentials to access legal aid and build her asylum case. She had taken the job at Aurelia precisely because it was a nexus for the powerful. She had been observing, listening, waiting for a chance, any chance, to get close to the men who had destroyed her. She had never, in her wildest dreams, imagined that Marcus Thorn himself would be seated at her table. Tonight, the mask of Elena the waitress had shattered. The accent. It was real, but it was a choice. It was a blend of all her languages, a tell that she affected. It was the armor of the underestimated. When she was just the girl with the accent, no one saw her. No one listened to her. She was a piece of furniture, and furniture hears everything. She looked at the 3 cards on her desk. The Sheikh's offer was safety. A stable, high-paying job in a respected fund. Dubois' offer was similar, a comfortable life. But Chen's card, it was different. I am offering you a conversation. Mutual enemies. Chen knew. He had to. The Shanghai logistics world was deeply intertwined with the Belt and Road, and that initiative was deeply intertwined with Russian energy. Chen would have certainly known of Mikhail Volkov. He wasn't offering her a job. He was offering her revenge. She picked up her cheap, prepaid burner phone. She looked at the number on David Chen's card. It wasn't an office number. It was a private mobile. She took a deep breath. The sun was starting to tint the New York sky a bruised purple. The city was waking up. And so was Elena Rostova-Volkova. She dialed the number. It rang once. Elena, David Chen's voice said. He wasn't asking. I was wondering when you would call. Can you be at the Baccarat Hotel in 1 hour? My car is already on its way to your location. Elena looked around her tiny, cramped room. How do you know my location? A dry chuckle from the other end. The same way I know your father was Mikhail Volkov. The same way I know that Thorn Capital's acquisition of Volkov Energy was facilitated using falsified Rosneft documents. I deal in logistics, Elena. Information is my primary asset. Your car is downstairs. Please do not be late. The line clicked dead. Elena looked out her window. A black Mercedes Maybach was double parked on her street, a sight so alien in Washington Heights that her neighbors were already stopping to stare. She put on the only other outfit she owned, a simple black dress, the one she'd worn to her asylum hearings. She brushed out her hair, letting it fall past her shoulders. She walked out of her apartment, down the 4 flights of stairs, and into the waiting car. The waitress was gone. The air had returned. Marcus Thorne woke up to a ringing phone. His head felt like it was full of crushed glass. He was in his $80 million penthouse, the sunrise streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and his mouth tasted like ashes. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night drinking Macallan 72 and throwing things. A Murano glass vase was in pieces by the fireplace. His tablet was at the bottom of his private lap pool. The humiliation was a physical sickness. It wasn't just that the deal was dead. He had been undressed in front of his peers by a waitress. The phone was his private line. It rang again. He snatched it. "What?" "Marcus, it's Julian Vance." Thorne's blood ran cold. Julian Vance was his main rival, the head of Vance Strategic, another, older money private equity firm. "Julian, what do you want?" "Just calling to congratulate you, Marcus." Vance's voice was smooth, dripping with false sincerity. "I heard about your performance at Aurelia last night." Thorne sat bolt upright. How did you hear about that?" "Bernard Dubois is an old friend. We had breakfast this morning. He was vivid. Said you were outclassed by the waitstaff. Something about 6 languages. He was quite taken with her. Said she eviscerated your Omani pitch." "Clean data, was it?" Thorne was speechless. The financial world was a small, gossipy village. The story was out. "He's poisoning the well," Thorne spat. "Oh, I don't think he needed to, Marcus. He's pulling LVMH's shipping consolidation from your logistics portfolio. That's... what? A $40 million a year loss for you? Ouch. He'll be back." "I don't think so. He's moving it to David Chen. Apparently Chen is starting a new special projects division, focusing on, what was it? Supply chain data integrity. And guess who he's rumored to be hiring to run it? The waitress." Thorne threw the phone across the room. It shattered against a marble column. He was ruined. It wasn't just the Omani deal. It was his reputation. In his world, strength was everything. Weakness, or worse, buffoonery, was a death sentence. And he had been made to look like the biggest buffoon in New York. He buzzed his assistant. "Get my legal team on the line, now. Find out the name of that waitress from Aurelia, the Eastern European one. I want her immigration status. I want her audited. I want to know if she's even legal. I am going to bury her. Do you hear me? Bury her." Meanwhile, in the 25,000 a night Harcourt suite at the Baccarat Hotel, Eleanor was finishing her tea. She was sitting opposite David Chen. The suite was quiet, filled with crystal and the scent of expensive Joe Malone candles. "He will come after you," Chen said, as if reading her mind. "He is a wounded animal, and wounded animals are predictable. He will try to have you deported." "My asylum claim is pending," Elena said, her voice steady. "It's weak, but it's valid." "It will not be weak for long," Chen replied. He slid a tablet across the table. "My legal team in D.C. has already filed a new brief on your behalf, under a new designation." Elena looked at the screen. "An O1 visa? Individuals with extraordinary ability or achievement." "Yes. Sponsored by the Chen Logistics Global Corporation. Your new title is Director of Special Acquisitions, Eurasian Division. Your starting salary is significant. And it includes a corporate apartment. The visa will be expedited. By the time Thorne's lawyers even find your name, you will be a protected corporate asset. He won't be able to touch you." Elena stared at the screen, the labyrinth of immigration terror she had lived in for 2 years. Gone. Just like that. "Why?" Elena asked, looking up. Why are you doing this, Mr. Chen? This is more than a job offer. Chen leaned back. Your father, Mikhail Volkov. He and I did business once, a long time ago, at Davos. He was a hard man, but an honest one. He believed in building things. Thorn is a breaker. I do not like breakers. They make the world unstable. He tapped the tablet. And I am not a sentimental man, Elena. What you did last night, your analysis of the Omani deal, it was brilliant. You saved me 10 billion and a lot of headaches. You said, mutual enemies, Elena pressed. Yes, Thorn Capital. Chen's face hardened. The way Thorn acquired Volkov Energy, it was not clean. He used falsified state documents from Rosneft to bypass international sanctions. It was a high-risk, deeply illegal move. And he got away with it. I know, Elena said, her voice a low, cold whisper. I've been trying to prove it for 2 years. You have been looking for the proof, Chen said. I have it. He made a gesture on the tablet. A new file opened. It was a secure data transfer, encrypted. When Thorn's team structured that deal, they were arrogant. They left a digital footprint. They used a server in Shanghai to route their communications, thinking it was hidden. It was not hidden from me. I have the original wire transfer instructions. I have the real Rosneft memos and the forged ones Thorn used. I have everything. Elena felt the blood rush from her face. You've had this. For 18 months. But on its own, it is just a weapon with no one to wield it. If I use it, it looks like a corporate raid. It starts a war with US regulators. But if you use it, Elena Rostova-Volkova, the dispossessed daughter, the last heir of Mikhail Volkov, then it is not a raid. It is justice. He slid the tablet to her. This is my offer, Elena. It is not a job. It is a partnership. We will use my resources, my lawyers and my proof, combined with your name and your story. We will file a suit in the US Southern District Court and in the High Court in London. We will not just sue Marcus Thorn. We will annihilate him. We will use the RICO statutes to claim his entire portfolio as the product of criminal enterprise. We will take Volkov Energy back, and in doing so, we will take Thorn Capital apart. Elena looked at the file, then at Chen. You get Volkov Energy, she stated. I get a 40% stake, Chen corrected her. You get 60%, and you get your name back, and you get to watch Marcus Thorn's empire crumble to dust, which I suspect is what you truly want. Elena looked at the tablet. It was the key to everything, her past, her future. She looked at David Chen, a man just as ruthless as Thorn, but smarter, and with a code she understood. When do we start? Elena asked. Chen smiled. You already have. 6 months. In the life of a city like New York, it was the flicker of a firefly, a change in seasons, a new restaurant opening, another closing. In the life of Marcus Thorn, it was an eternity. It was the entire agonizing span of a descent into hell. The venue for his final judgment was not a glittering boardroom, but the solemn wood-paneled expanse of Courtroom 14D in the Daniel Patrick Moynihan United States Courthouse. The air was heavy with the smell of old law books, floor polish, and the distinct metallic tang of palpable fear. The gallery was packed, a standing-room-only congregation of the morbidly curious. This was the new King table, and it was the hottest ticket in town. In the front row sat the piranhas, financial reporters from Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, their pens scratching furiously. Behind them, the society vultures from Vanity Fair and Tatler, there to document the public execution of a man who had, just 6 months ago, been their host. And at the defendant's table sat Marcus Thorn. The press had been unkind, but reality was worse. The granite man had crumbled. The $5,000 Keaton suit, once a symbol of his armor, now hung on his frame, 2 sizes too large. His skin, once bronzed by weekends in the Hamptons, was a sallow, papery grey. His icy blue eyes, the ones that had frozen Eleanor with their contempt, were now bloodshot and paranoid, darting from his lawyer to the judge to the imposing double doors at the back of the courtroom. His hand, resting on a carafe of water, had a fine, uncontrollable tremor. He was a man hollowed out, waiting for the final blow. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A sharp click-clack-click of heels on the marble floor cut through the ambient murmur. The entire room turned. Elena Rostova-Volkova did not walk. She proceeded. She was a vision in charcoal grey. The Armani suit was not a costume, it was a uniform, tailored with military precision. Her dark hair was pulled back into the same severe, elegant chignon she had worn at Aurelia, but it was no longer a waitress's practical style. It was a statement of control. She was flanked by a legal team that radiated an aura of obscene expense. At her side was David Chen's personal attorney, Mr. Harding, a man whose calm demeanor and silver hair belied a mind like a diamond-tipped drill. Elena took her seat at the plaintiff's table. She placed a single, slim leather portfolio in front of her. She poured a glass of water, her hand as steady as a surgeon's. And in that entire time, from the door to her chair, she did not once look at Marcus Thorne. To look at him would be to acknowledge his existence, and for Eleanor, he had already ceased to exist. The 6 months had been a blur, not of terror, but of work. The asylum case, which had been her waking nightmare, was dismissed in a flurry of paperwork. It was replaced by an O1 Extraordinary Ability Visa, sponsored by the Chen Logistics Global Corporation. Her new title, Director of Special Acquisitions, Eurasian Division, was more than a title. It was a shield and a sword. The lawsuit, Volkova vs. Thorne Capital, had not been a lawsuit. It had been a nuclear bomb, as Chen had promised. The moment Chen's digital evidence of the Rosneft forgeries was filed under seal, the game was over. Elena's own contribution had been the key that unlocked it all. She was the only one alive who could cross-reference Chen's data with her father's encrypted personal ledgers. She was the Rosetta Stone for her father's ruined empire. The Wall Street Journal had run the story on the front page. The Ghost of Volkov. How a waitress's lawsuit exposed a billion-dollar fraud. The story was irresistible. The polyglot waitress who spoke 6 languages. The arrogant billionaire who had mocked her accent. The secret revenge of a fallen oligarch's daughter. It was a drama of almost Shakespearean proportions, and the financial world, which ran on narrative, had devoured it. The fallout for Thorne had been immediate and catastrophic. The SEC, forced into action by the public filing, had launched a full-scale investigation. The Department of Justice was circling, smelling blood. His investors, not out of morality, but out of fear, had fled. The CalPERS pension fund pulled its $2 billion mandate. His credit lines, the lifeblood of his firm, were frozen overnight. Thorne Capital, once a fortress of glass and steel, was now just a shell, its assets frozen by the court, its reputation annihilated. Now, in this courtroom, all that was left was the eulogy. Your Honor, Thorne's lawyer, a bulldog named Glass, blustered, his face red. This is a sham, a mockery of the legal system. My client, Mr. Thorne, is the victim here. The victim of a sophisticated corporate smear campaign orchestrated by a foreign competitor. He gestured wildly toward Elena. This woman was a plant. She used her position of trust to— Objection, Mr. Harding said, his voice quiet, almost bored. Mr. Glass is testifying, and his testimony is, to be frank, fictional. Sustained, the judge sighed. Glass pressed on, desperation creeping into his voice. Your Honor, this is a civil matter, a business dispute. We are here today to discuss a settlement. My client, in the interest of moving on, is prepared to make a very, very generous offer to to Miss Volkova, to resolve this unfortunate misunderability. He smiled, a slick salesman's smile. This was his last play. Buy his way out. Eleanor, who had been staring at the judge, leaned slightly to her right. She whispered 2 sentences into Mr. Harding's ear. She didn't whisper in Russian or French or Mandarin. She whispered in the cold, clear, calculating English of a Georgetown-trained executive. Harding nodded once. He rose slowly. Mr. Glass is performing admirably, Your Honor, for an audience of 1. But we are not here to discuss a settlement. We are here to reject one. A gasp went through the gallery. Glass's smile froze. Harding continued, his voice resonating with absolute authority. A settlement, Your Honor, implies a negotiation between 2 legitimate parties. We contend that Thorn Capital is not, and has not been for some time, a legitimate party. It is a crime scene. That is an outrageous allegation, Glass sputtered. It is not an allegation, Harding said, his voice dropping, becoming a blade. It is a prelude. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, we have been advised to reject any and all settlement offers for a very specific reason. We were, in fact, waiting for a separate matter to conclude. He paused, letting the silence in the room stretch to a breaking point. As of 9:15 this morning, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York has received a 12-count indictment from a federal grand jury against Mr. Marcus Thorn. Thorn stopped breathing. The charges, Harding continued, as if reading a grocery list, include 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit money laundering, and 7 counts of violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, related directly to the forged Rosneft documents used in the Volkov Energy acquisition. A low, guttural sound escaped Thorn's throat, a sound of a man being hollowed out. His shaking hand, the one on the carafe, knocked over his water glass. The glass didn't break, but the water spread across the polished table, a dark stain of defeat. It was a stain far larger and more permanent than the one he had mocked at Aurelia. Therefore, Harding concluded, we move that this civil proceeding be stayed, indefinitely. We are, after all, civilized. We would not want to inconvenience Mr. Thorn. He looked for the first time at Marcus Thorn, his eyes filled with a surgeon's cold pity. We believe he needs to prepare for his imminent arrest. The judge stared. The gallery erupted. The gavel cracked, a sound like a gunshot, over and over. Order! Order! It was over. Elena stood. She calmly gathered her leather portfolio. She did not rush. She buttoned the single button of her Armani jacket. She turned to leave, and, in doing so, her path took her directly past the defendant's table. For the first time in 6 months, her eyes met Marcus Thorn's. His were wide, pleading, shattered. He looked like a child about to be struck. He was looking for... what? Mercy? Recognition? Elena's gaze was flat. It was not filled with hatred or triumph or even anger. That had all burned away, leaving something as cold and clear as the Siberian tundra. Her look was one of pure, devastating finality. She held it for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then she looked away and kept walking. He was pile, dust, and he had been blown away. She pushed through the courtroom doors into the flash storm. The hallway was a wall of light and noise, a cacophony of reporters shouting her name. Ms. Volkova, is this justice for your father? Elena, what's next for Volkov Energy? Ms. Volkova, how does it feel? She said nothing. Her silence was louder than Thorn's roar had ever been. She moved through the crowd, an island of calm, until she reached the street, where a black Mercedes Maybach was waiting, its door held open by David Chen. She slipped into the cool, silent cocoon of the car. The door shut, sealing out the world. It is done, Elena said, her first words since the courthouse. Chen, sitting opposite her, permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. "No, Elena," he said, as the car pulled silently into traffic. "It is begun. Tearing Thorn down was the easy part. Rebuilding Volkov energy, that will be much harder. You have not just made an enemy of a failed billionaire. You have reminded the Kremlin that you exist." Elena looked out the window at the city flying by. "The Kremlin made an enemy of me. I've just been busy. Now I am not." The car turned onto 59th Street. As they waited at a light, Elena's gaze fell on a familiar building. Aurelia. Through the gleaming windows, she could see the lunch service in full swing. She saw a young woman, a waitress with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, polishing Zalto wine glasses, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. For a fleeting second, the waitress looked up, her eyes meeting Elena's across the street, a momentary connection between two worlds. Elena Rostova-Volkova did not smile. She simply nodded, a small, sharp acknowledgement of the ghost she had been. She had been underestimated. She had been mocked for an accent that was her armor. She had been dismissed for a job that was her camouflage. She had been insulted for a background that was, in the end, her greatest weapon. Marcus Thorne's fatal mistake, she thought, was simple. He believed he was superior because he spoke one language, the language of money, loudly. He never stopped to consider that the woman pouring his wine understood 6 languages, including the only one that truly matters: the language of power. And now, at last, she was speaking it fluently. What a story. It's a powerful reminder that the person serving your coffee, the driver of your cab, or the janitor cleaning your office might be living a life you can't even imagine. They might be a refugee, a genius, a survivor, or, in Eleanor's case, a fallen heiress just waiting for her moment. Marcus Thorne's world collapsed because he made one fatal mistake. He mistook a different accent for a different intelligence. He believed his wealth made him superior. But true power isn't about the money you have. It's about the respect you show to those you think have none. What did you think of Elena's incredible transformation? Have you ever witnessed someone get so spectacularly and satisfyingly proven wrong? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Elena's story of justice and revenge, do us a favor and hit that like button. It really helps our channel. And if you want more true life stories of drama, resilience, and incredible twists, make sure you smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to everyone. You never know who you're talking to.